Video by Emmanuel Isaiah Smith.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and today's date is Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. The time is 1:06 p.m. and I am in Doral, Florida. The topic of today's lecture is Undercover Operatives Part IV, Miami-Dade Thug Units. And I would like to begin this lecture with one word, and that word is zoo. Z-O-O, zoo. Go to the Miami-Dade County Zoo, ladies and gentlemen, and go to the baboon cages and select a baboon. It doesn't matter what the gender is. It doesn't matter what the age of the animal is. It doesn't matter if it's a tall baboon. It doesn't matter if it's a short baboon. It doesn't matter if it's a fat baboon. It doesn't matter if it's a skinny baboon. It doesn't matter if it's an energetic baboon. It doesn't matter if it's a lazy baboon. It doesn't matter if it's a baboon that's safe for petting. It doesn't matter if it's a wild, violent baboon. It doesn't matter if it's a smart baboon. It doesn't matter if it's a stupid baboon. Go to the baboon cages, ladies and gentlemen, and select a baboon. Okay, the primate. A baboon that is genetically the cousin of any ape, gorilla, monkey, chimpanzee, or orangutan. Go to the local zoo, ladies and gentlemen, and select the finest baboon that they have. Take the baboon to a clothing store. Get the baboon a nice shirt, a nice pair of pants, and a comfortable pair of sneakers. Maybe this clothing store has accessories like baseball caps and sunglasses. Buy this baboon a nice baseball cap and a nice pair of sunglasses as well. It could be any pair of sunglasses. Get him a black pair, get him a colored pair. Just get him a nice pair of sunglasses. Get this baboon a nice baseball cap too. Maybe a nice baseball cap that has your favorite sports team on it. And dress the baboon up real nice in these clothes. Next, take the baboon home. Go on the internet. Maybe feed the baboon first so it's nice and full. Maybe give him some bananas or some blueberries, or I'm not sure if baboons are carnivores. Maybe you could fix the baboon a bologna sandwich with extra mayonnaise. Maybe give the baboon a Diet Dr. Pepper to wash it all down with. Then when the baboon is nice and comfortable, sit him down on your couch. Maybe turn on the television set for the baboon, right? Maybe you could put on a nice soap opera for the baboon. I hear baboons like drama on television. Or maybe you could put on a nice comedy for the baboon. Maybe a nice sitcom or something. Or maybe you could pop in a DVD for the baboon and let him watch a nice action film. Anything to keep the baboon nice and occupied and comfortable. Right? Maybe you could take some body spray and spray the baboon down. Maybe the zoo washed him before they gave him to you. Just bring the baboon home and set him down on the couch. All right, turn on a nice program for the baboon, and then you go to your computer, right? Go to your computer, pull up Google, and type in the Google search bar how to be an undercover operative, right? And you don't have to do much research. You don't have to do much research. Just click on the first website that pops up, right? And print out whatever comes up. Just print it, right? For the baboon. When you print this item, staple it and hand it to the baboon to read. Okay? If it's a baboon that's having a little trouble, you can read the manual to the baboon itself. All right? Then what you do is take the baboon, right? Maybe give it a cell phone. Or maybe you can give the baboon an electronic earpiece. Or maybe you could give the baboon a directed energy weapon, or maybe you could give the baboon a stingray device, or give the baboon anything and everything you possibly can to make his new life as an undercover operative easier, ladies and gentlemen. And then what you do is you take the baboon, maybe put him in your car, right? Because it's an undercover now, it's an operative. It's a full-blown operative now, having read that manual. Take the baboon, sit it in the passenger seat of your car, right? Buckle it up so that the baboon can be safe. Maybe you can give the baboon a nice name. Okay, it doesn't have to be a sophisticated name. Maybe the baboon's name while it was in the zoo, maybe they called it JoJo or something, right? But now that you're the owner of the baboon and you're teaching it how to be an undercover operative, give the baboon a code name to keep its identity safe, okay? So we'll call the baboon Carl, right? So you got Carl the baboon, fresh from the Miami-Dade County Zoo, right? He's sitting in the passenger seat with you. You know, he's nice and comfortable. You got the baboon. You've strapped it into the seat belt to keep the baboon safe. Now what you want to do is turn on the radio for the baboon so it has entertainment, you know? Because baboons, from what I hear, from what I've read in various scientific journals, they have a short attention span, right? So you got your baboon, you got a nice radio program going for it, you got it a nice cell phone, you got it some devices, you got it earpiece so it can hear electronic communications. Take the baboon and maybe drive anywhere. It doesn't matter where it is. Take it anywhere. Take it anywhere in the county. Take it to downtown Miami. Take it to Aventura. Take it to Sunny Isles Beach. Take it to Midtown Miami. Take it to Overtown Miami. Maybe you could show the baboon a few bus rides, or maybe you could give it a ride on the trolley. Show it around. Take this baboon and maybe take it to the Metro Rail so it can have a nice look around the area. Take this baboon, Carl, the baboon to Pinecrest. Maybe you could take it out to Homestead, Florida. Maybe you could treat the baboon to a midday snack at Subway or something. Maybe get it a nice, maybe get it an Italian BLT. Help them wash it down with a Gatorade or something. Treat the baboon to a nice day out on the town. All right, show it around the county. And give it a good semblance of its domain, right? Because baboons, monkeys, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, they like domains. They like areas where it's nice and spread out. Take this baboon in full gear and teach it the ways of Miami-Dade undercover operatives. And maybe after a training period of, I don't know, maybe a week or two, You can give this baboon, maybe let it put its hand on a document. Maybe the state constitution of Florida. Tell the baboon to put its right hand, on the state constitution of Florida and raise his left hand to the square, as they say, and make the baboon swear an oath of service to the state of Florida. All right? Maybe give the baboon a tree branch or something that it can protect itself with, and set him out into the streets. Maybe you could hire a babysitter for the baboon to shadow it, make sure it stays out of trouble, make sure it doesn't try to climb a tree and get away from his assignment. Right? This is a loyal baboon. He wants to do his job with integrity, ladies and gentlemen. Set that baboon out into the wild. I can promise you, ladies and gentlemen, as I sit here this day, that baboon, that primate, that simian, okay, Carl the baboon, will become a better undercover operative than any undercover operative anywhere in Miami-Dade County, ladies and gentlemen. We are here, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about undercover operatives in Miami-Dade County. Ladies and gentlemen, the subtitle of this lecture is Miami-Dade Thug Units. And the reason, ladies and gentlemen, I am calling this lecture Miami-Dade County Thug Units is because that is what the undercover operatives in Miami-Dade County act like. They act like thugs. Okay? And a lot of them have a thuggish mindset. Okay? A lot of the Miami-Dade undercover operatives are homicidal. They're violent. They're egregiously stupid. They're biohazardous. They're hateful, they're annoying, and they are unprofessional. Okay? And before I continue this lecture, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to inform you that, as usual, I am doing this lecture outdoors. And I may have to raise or project my voice from time to time to drown out the background noise. So please, ladies and gentlemen, adjust your volume accordingly. We are talking about Miami-Dade County undercover operatives, ladies and gentlemen. It's a sad state of affairs, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? When you have persons that one day say to themselves, you know what? I'm going to go into law enforcement, a noble profession, right? I don't think there's anybody in the country aside from people who are just totally and absolutely adverse to risk that would tell a person who goes into law enforcement that's a bad career choice. No, it isn't. If a person decides to go into law enforcement in any capacity, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be a patrolman. It could be a patrolman, okay? It could be a dispatch officer. It could be an internal affairs investigator. It could be a park ranger. It could be a detective. It could be a homicide investigator. It could be a forensic specialist. There are so many wonderful careers in law enforcement that a lot of people decide at some point in high school or college or maybe after that they want to do, right? They've reasoned within themselves that this career is the career for me. It pays well, it has good benefits, I get to learn a lot about the law, I get to learn a lot about people, I get to learn a lot about this country, I get to learn a lot about policy and procedure, I get to contribute to the welfare of the state or the country. All right? It's a good job. And then there are other law enforcers that say, you know what, I want to go a little deeper into the matter. I want to go the plainclothes route. I want to investigate this or that, or this person or that person, or this matter or that matter, or this crime or that crime from a plainclothes posture. Because that will allow me, as a law enforcer, to get to the root of a matter without being detected. Okay, that's noble too. But here's the discipline, ladies and gentlemen, to being a law enforcer undercover. And mind you, ladies and gentlemen, I am not an undercover law enforcer. I have not trained or sworn any oaths of services to any law enforcement body as of right now. However, I have done a semi-law enforcement citizen patrol assignment in Kendall, Florida, in the Olympic Park area for the last 7 months, which in my estimation, and I believe in the estimation of the officer that I have corresponded with, achieved results. Good results, positive results, eye-opening results for the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, okay? And it's been a joy to take part in that, okay? Despite the challenges, all right, I've had knuckleheads and dimwits and convicted felons and derelicts and degenerates attempt to derail my patrol because, like any knucklehead, they don't want to be discovered. It became obvious to them that, probably based on some of my 911 calls against them right in their faces, that I am doing a work in conjunction with a local law enforcement body. I've been called pig. As a matter of fact, that was actually the highlight of my day, really, that day. Because the guy that called me that was a convicted sex offender, and eventually he ended up going to jail off of my tip for being a sex offender in a public park, which he's not allowed to be. All right? So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that my perspective, okay, on law enforcement has widened since taking on this project. And you may ask, well, Smith, you're a political dissident. Why would you join forces with the very government that you accuse of being complicit in state-sanctioned thuggery through gang stalking? Well, the answer to that is very simple. First, it was my way of giving back to Miami-Dade County, because I believe that Miami-Dade County as a governmental auxiliary has served me well. Secondly, it was my way of giving back to the Miami-Dade County Sheriff's Office, because they have served me well as a sovereign citizen who has placed numerous calls, both emergency and non-emergency, to Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office over the past 4 years during my sojourn in Kendall, Florida. And quite frankly, I'm touched that every time I make one of those calls, officers respond not knowing what the dangers are, but they respond anyhow, and they do an investigation. Sometimes the investigation is quick, sometimes they ask a few questions to people, but ultimately they respond. And this is my way of giving back to Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office for the service that they do. Okay? Thirdly, doing citizen patrol has allowed me to observe more closely and more carefully the various gang stalking dynamics that occur in South Florida in general, in Kendall, Florida in particular, and in the Olympic Park area and surrounding area, which includes the Kendall Lakes Library in particular. You see, I've had the opportunity to observe signaling to a higher degree doing citizen patrol, which is a volunteer position, than I would have had I not started this citizen patrol assignment. So I'm able to observe gang stalking. It has benefited me quite a bit. Some of the officers think what I do is useful. Some of the officers think that what I do is not needed. But despite that, this assignment has widened my perspectives on a lot of things, gang stalking included. Because a lot of the knuckleheads that I've been watching over the past 7 months, all right, I've actually posted verbal altercations and verbal exchanges I've had with some of these knuckleheads on my various websites. All right, I think there's one of them on my YouTube if you care to watch it. All right, it has widened my perspective on a lot of things. And I am in plain clothes. I mean, I'm not in a uniform. I mean, if Miami-Dade County Sheriff were to say, hey, take this uniform and put it on when you do your patrol twice a day, I'd do it. I'd happily do it. But I'm in plain clothes when I go to the Olympic Park, right? So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I know some of what an undercover operative, a responsible undercover operative, might feel when he goes to work. All right, now I don't know all the particulars of what the life of an undercover operative is. I imagine that they have some law enforcement training. I imagine at some point they made a conscious decision to do undercover operative work as opposed to plainclothes work or patrolman work or detective work or some of the other jobs that law enforcement agencies have to offer. I imagine these undercovers have a personal philosophy as to how they go about their business as well. All right, different undercover operatives have different standards of safety that they hold themselves to, different standards of right and wrong, because mind you, there's an ethical gray area in some law enforcement work, right? Especially when you're dealing with violent suspects or cartels or pedophiles or serial rapists or some other thug that you might be investigating. Okay, you could be investigating a fentanyl operation or a human smuggling operation, and you have to go in with a clear conscience, you have to go in focused, and you have to go in with a sense of toughness and a sense of what it means to complete your objective or complete your goal so you can go back home to your family, if you have one. A lot of guys that have families don't do undercover work because it's perilous. All right, some undercovers have to wear hidden cameras and earpieces and bugging equipment and wires and things like that. What if somebody or a group of people that you're investigating find out that this guy they thought was a member of their operation is actually a law enforcer? What are they going to do to that guy? Well, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to beat him into 1 inch of his life or they're going to kill him. So undercover operatives have a unique challenge when it comes to doing their job. Okay? Me personally, when I used to watch undercover operative movies as a youngster, and when I say a youngster, I mean my youth. before the age of 18. I was always thrilled at the narratives, at the action, at the plot, at the procedure. And at the end of the movie, typically at the end of the movie, there was one undercover operative movie where the guy actually ended up getting killed. It was that movie, The Departed. An excellent, excellent film directed by Martin Scorsese. Came out in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. Starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, Vera Farmiga. I think Jennifer Love Hewitt was in the movie. Excellent movie. Excellent movie. I think Martin Scorsese won the Oscar for Best Director that year for having directed that movie. Excellent movie. In that movie, the main character, the undercover operative, dies in the end. But it just goes to show that the nature of undercover work is uncertain and it is perilous. There are other movies, like for example, Deep Cover, Donnie Brasco, starring Al Pacino and Johnny Depp. Another really good movie. All right. Other movies like that, The Undercover survives. And you as the viewer feel a sense of relief at the end of the movie because it's like, wow, you know, that's how it's done. You go into the job, you complete your objective, and you get out alive. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's compare and contrast that with the undercover operative that you see here in Miami-Dade County. So, me personally, as far as I can fathom, I am not, and mind you, this is me talking, right? Your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith. This is me talking, okay? As far as I can tell, I'm not under investigation for being in any cartel. I don't think I'm under investigation for any heinous crime. I'm not under investigation, as far as I can tell, for anything that would require mobs of really useless undercover operatives following me, excuse me, I had to belch, ladies and gentlemen, following me around Miami-Dade County, not necessarily doing any investigative work or research. I mean, it would be nice if there were undercovers investigating my claims of gang stalking, honestly and fortuitously, ethically and with integrity and professionalism. But somehow, and mind you, ladies and gentlemen, as I continue, you may ask yourself, Smith, how do you figure that the people you're running into are undercover operatives? It's obvious, ladies and gentlemen. Keep something in mind here. You're talking to a man who has experienced heightened levels of gang stalking activity in his personal and professional lives over the past 10 years. But I've experienced gang stalking in various capacities over the last 30 years. Okay? I know natural human behavior when I see it. I know unnatural human behavior when I see it. And as I continue on, I would like to say that anyone listening to this lecture right now who is of the mindset that gang stalking or the claims of gang stalking are overblown or exaggerated or not as the targeted person says it is, shame on you. Shame on you, and quite frankly, turn your head away from this program, because this program is for people that appreciate candor. This program is a program for people who appreciate forthrightness, and this program is a program that appreciates people who like virtue. Okay? So if you're none of the above, if you don't believe gang stalking exists, if your idea of gang stalking is some random article you found off of Yahoo, Google, or Bing, saying that gang stalking is a delusion, or that everyone, no matter how many people it is, come forward about gang stalking, they're all psychotic, or if you're a person that's of the mindset, or you try to prove anyhow, that gang stalking ain't nothing but petty harassment and it's not that big a deal, change the damn channel. All right, because you're not doing nothing but wasting your time. You're not wasting my time. I'm getting the word out about gang stalking and have done so for about 10 years now. And quite frankly, I'm of the mindset that my work, my words, my articles, my posts, my written work, my spoken work, my insinuations, suggestions, and assertions have reached the ears of persons who need to hear this. And not just here in the United States, but around the world. Okay? So, if you're not a person that respects that, if you're not a person that acknowledges that, you're probably better off getting your information about gang stalking from somewhere else. Because you're definitely not welcome here. Welcome here are people that like evidence, you like facts, you like probable narratives, and you like consistency, which are all faculties, okay, and components of the Gang Stalking in Action program, which I've run for about 10 years. So you are welcome here, okay? And I encourage you to observe this information and absorb this information and be vigilant. Because I think some of the people who may watch this program are targeted persons yourself. You're just not sure how to look for the action, and you're not able to understand how to quantify it. But hopefully after listening to my lectures, you get a better grasp on what gang stalking is, how it works, and how you might be affected by it, you or your loved ones. Okay? And, these are some of the same things that I have relayed to my significant other, Lori. I've instructed her to be watchful and vigilant as well. And I have given her in bits and pieces information about clandestine gang stalking, which I believe that she is a victim of as well. So back to the main narrative, ladies and gentlemen. When you talk about undercover operatives, you're talking about people who are wards of the state, they're employees of the state, or they're employees of a semi-governmental auxiliary, or maybe they're employees of a private company or corporation. Maybe they're employees of a private investigator's office. Maybe they're employees of the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Maybe they're employees of a bounty hunter's office. Maybe they're employees of a number of agencies and operations. Now, having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to make an address really quickly. I'm not of the mindset at all that all of my undercover operatives are against me. Okay? The American ones are, and the ones here in Miami-Dade County are definitely against me in some capacity, and they use gang stalking tactics against me as a weapon. I believe I have foreign undercovers as well from various countries that have been allowed to come here and observe me to see if there's any truth to my claims on gang stalking. As far as I can tell, my foreign undercover operatives have been very professional. The ones from other countries, which I can spot you too. Don't be scared now. You're talking to a man who has been made hyper vigilant by this program. Okay, I can spot an undercover walking down the street coming towards me from a mile away. Probably longer than that, 2 miles away. And it's not difficult to tell them apart from everyday persons. All right? Even the undercovers that use the same signaling, pestering, disruption, and annoyance tactics as regular gang stalkers, I can tell the operatives from the stalkers. All right? So when you talk about domestic or foreign undercover operatives, I've had better experiences with the foreign ones. The ones that come from other countries to watch me to see if my claims about gang stalking are true. I know that's why they're here. And while they're here, my gang stalkers, my American operatives, and the liaisons that are in charge of my gang stalking campaign, they're on their best behavior. They're on their best behavior while the foreign operatives are here observing. Okay? It's kind of like when you're at the workplace, right? And an auditor from the company you work for comes into the office to audit the place, make sure everything's on the up and up, make sure everything is being documented properly, making sure all the transactions are handled properly, making sure all the policies are being followed, making sure that the supervisors, the managers, the assistant managers, the employees, everyone is briefed and up to date on how to do their jobs. Gonna get a sip of water, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, the auditor comes to your workplace and he's looking behind trash cans, looking in trash cans, looking in your cubicle, looking in your drawers, looking at your computers. Maybe he's auditing emails. Maybe he's auditing employee interactions with their supervisors or employee interactions with each other. The auditor is monitoring training modules, making sure everyone's up to date on their training, just making sure that everything is on the up and up in the office, right? So what happens when the auditor from the company comes down into your workplace? What happens? Right? Everyone's on their best behavior. Right? Why? Because the auditor is a corporate officer for the most part who is determined to do an accurate report as to whether or not things are on the up and up in your office. Right? So everyone's on their best behavior. Everyone's, got their pants pulled up. Everyone's got their phones on silent. Everyone's operating according to procedure. Everyone's doing it the best they possibly can, right? So much, in fact, that the manager of the place probably looks around like, wow, I wish my employees were like this all the time. Why is it that they only act this great when there's an auditor doing an audit? But I digress, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone's on their best behavior when the auditor comes to town, right? It's the same situation here, okay? My liaisons and my undercovers, the ones that pester me on a daily basis, they're on their best behavior when foreign operatives come to America to watch me, right? From day to day. They're given remote access to my location, right? And they get to watch me interact with liaisons, American operatives, and stalkers, so that these foreign operatives can get some semblance of what I'm talking about with respect to gang stalking, so that foreign operatives can come here and see if I'm telling the truth, so that foreign operatives can come here on behalf of their government and see if what I'm saying about gang stalking is exaggerated or not. All right? Now, if you're a foreign operative and you come here, if you're watching me 24 hours a day, what you're going to see is you're going to see an African American male, 40 years of age, 6'5", 260 pounds, going about his day, looking after his significant other, documenting instances of gang stalking and reporting them, eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, maybe doing a little exploring, a little touring, and then you're going to see me go to sleep at night, but you're also going to see, right? You're going to see my interactions with the people around me. And here's what I think is happening, ladies and gentlemen. I think that what the American operatives are doing is they're only granting access to me as a targeted individual. They're only granting access to me to foreign operatives when everything is on the up and up, or if there is something going on with me personally that might make me look less than. So for example, this is how American operatives work. So what they'll do is they'll tell the foreign operatives, no, you can't see Smith right now. And they'll pull out some BS reason out of a hat, right? And say, this is why you can't see Smith right now, right? And the reason that the American operatives aren't letting the foreign operatives see me at that particular time is because the American operatives know that I got a bunch of Cuban stalkers pestering me at that particular moment. And they don't want the Cuban population of Miami-Dade County to look bad. And they also don't want it to look as if I know what I'm talking about with respect to gang stalking. Okay? This ability, ladies and gentlemen, to pester a person under the radar using a signaling mechanism and using various covert mechanisms to achieve goals, including the pestering of people you don't want around, that is something that the United States law enforcement and or undercover operative auxiliaries value, right? It's a gift, all right? The Cuban population here in Miami-Dade, Florida has been given this gift, right? This covert clandestine gift to be able to mobilize themselves and essentially do whatever they want to do so long as they wait on signals. That is supposed to be a gift to the population here for participating. It's like a thank you. It's like a pat on the back. It's like a pat on the shoulder. And I don't know that the Cuban population of Miami-Dade County realizes that what they're doing is tantamount to high treason. I don't think the population here does that, knows that, okay? I've done videos in the past where I have identified the Cuban state or the country of Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism, and it is. Okay, I've documented that thoroughly in my previous lecture, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that the population of Cuba or the population of the United States, or rather the Cuban population of the United States, is on board with that. What I am saying is this. Given that the majority population here is Cuban, and given that there is almost a 110% chance that gang stalking is practiced in Cuba along with the terrorism, I don't think that the orchestrators of gang stalking want to lose the Cuban people or the country Cuba as clients for this covert clandestine thuggery. Okay? I don't think they want to lose the Cuban people or the country Cuba as clients. Do you understand? When you go into business with gang stalkers, you become their client. They teach you all the signaling mechanisms, they teach you all the pestering mechanisms, all the attack mechanisms, all the biohazardous mechanisms, and all the espionage mechanisms as a provider of a service. You see? And you become their client afterwards. All right? Now, here's what I'm going to say too. Right? Gang stalking is a business enterprise. Okay? The military-industrial complex is the beneficiary of gang stalking. All of the spying technology, stratagem, personnel mobilization, vehicular components, all of these things are provided to the national security and intelligence apparatus in this country by the military-industrial complex. Okay, which gets, if I'm not mistaken, $2 trillion a year from the American taxpayer to provide the Departments of Defense and Justice with the equipment they need to fight terrorism or to fight crime. But a piece of this equipment is being used on the streets, in companies, in churches, in neighborhoods and communities to benefit gang stalkers in properly identifying and disrupting targeted individuals. You see, undercover police work is different than undercover military work. Undercover military work is different than undercover private investigator work. Undercover private investigator work is different than undercover bounty hunter work. Undercover bounty hunter work is different than undercover observers, right? I mean, just think of it. Think of the most basic instance of undercover activity you could possibly think of, the most basic instance. Okay, the most basic instance of undercover activity that I can think of are secret shoppers, right? What does a secret shopper do, and how does a secret shopper compare to a military undercover, a law enforcement undercover, or one of the zoo-like undercovers that I encounter, right? So a secret shopper, what do? They're hired by the company, right? Maybe it's a firm that offers secret shopper services to a company, right? What do these companies do? They charge a fee to a company, right? And once the company has paid the fee to the secret shoppers, right, they go out and they go into a business or establishment, or maybe they go to an event, and they act like customers. And they walk around and they observe the employees, they observe the customers, they observe the atmosphere, they observe the interactions. They observe a lot of things, and then they report back to the company that has hired them to observe what their findings were. Oh, this employee was great. This employee was not so great. This employee went above and beyond. This employee was very rude. This employee was very knowledgeable. This employee didn't know much. These employees were really good with customers. These employees were not very good with customers. The place was clean or the place was dirty. The place was busy or the place was slow. You know, these policies were being observed. These policies were not being observed. The secret shopper goes back to the company that hired them to observe their employees and gives them a report as to what it is they observed. And then the company can make decisions based on that report as to how to make the workplace more efficient. Right? If only undercover work were that simple. Okay? You'd think that an undercover operative would have the sense and the judgment to maybe approach their job in the same way. Observe, see what's going on, and report back to your superiors what you find. And maybe start giving these undercover operatives body cameras, okay, or maybe microscopic cameras in their eyeglasses, or a lot of my undercovers wear cameras in their wristwatches, or they wear an ink pen in their shirt that has a little camera on it. Some of my undercover operatives have little cameras in their shoes, and they walk right up to me within like 6 inches, and they're filming me from like 6 inches away, right? I'm shooing them away. I'm like, get the hell out of here, man. I don't need you in my face. Even if you are an undercover, can I please get some damn space? There's nothing that pisses me off more when I'm out and about than undercover operatives walking right up to me, okay? And the reason that angers me so badly is because they're not doing anything but trying to either get some sort of an altercation started, or they're trying to spread some kind of a germ to me. That is the only reason. And the reason I say that is because undercover operatives in Miami-Dade, they're hostile. They're hostile. They're hostile and they're violent. And they're not professional. Okay, they look for reasons to start altercations. They look for reasons to start problems. They look for reasons to engage in malfeasance. And the reason they do that is because their lives and their jobs become more interesting when there's conflict. If there's no conflict, they don't feel special. They feel like just another undercover operative watching people. But when there are scuffles, when there's instigations, when there's problems, when there's conflicts, when there are matters that need police attention, when there are matters that need other kinds of attention, now the undercover operative feels special, right? A lot of undercover operatives here in Miami-Dade County get out of bed and they go out into the world and they say, how can I get some crap started today to make myself stand out? Right? Let me find some fodder. Let me find a signal or something. Let me plug into some gang stalking so I can be so my fellow stalkers can point me to somebody that I can pester or annoy or even attack, with the hope that that person will get up and punch me right in the nose. At that point, I can get up, I can call the cops on them, I can do a big, beautiful report, and I can call my supervisor tomorrow morning and say, hey, you'll never guess what happened to me yesterday. I was just minding my own business, following all proper protocols and procedures. I was doing everything that I was taught to do in my undercover law enforcement training, or my undercover military training, or my undercover private investigator training. I did everything that I was asked to do. And some nutcase just randomly jumped up and punched me in the nose. The supervisor might ask, well, what did you do to provoke that person? Of course the undercover's gonna lie. And they're gonna say, well, I didn't do anything. I didn't provoke him. I didn't try to start an altercation with him. I didn't try to do anything. I was just minding my business, and I was doing exactly what I was taught to do in my undercover officer training manual. I did everything that I was taught to do. And this was random. And I want you to know, sir, that as an undercover operative, I operate with the highest levels of integrity. I operate with the highest levels of distinction, and I operate with the highest levels of gratitude for my God, my country, my church, and my family, and I take those values to work with me each and every day as an undercover operative, right? Essentially trying to raise his status in the department by starting altercations and by essentially using those altercations as a way to draw attention to himself, right? I just had a knucklehead walk past me just a second ago trying to disrupt the lecture, and I crossed the street to the other side of the street to get away so he wouldn't disrupt it, and he let out some sort of a high-pitched shriek. All right? He's probably an undercover operative, probably a ward of the Cuban government, and if he's a ward of the Cuban government, then he's probably a terrorist. Okay? So those are the kinds of undercovers that I got following me around Miami-Dade County as a matter of procedure and protocol. Okay? Now some might ask, Smith, first of all, why do you have gang stalkers? And secondly, why do you have undercover operatives around you? What would make liaisons, gang stalkers, and undercover operatives this interested in you to where you encounter them on a daily basis? Well, the answer to that is simple, ladies and gentlemen. So, for example, here's how I got gang stalkers. I made the wrong enemy. All right? And on top of that, on top of making the wrong enemy at some point in my childhood or my teens, I got unfortunately plugged into some real buffoonish liaisons who at some point in probably my early childhood, like around the age of 10, were referred to me or referred to my maternal or paternal families. It's hard to decipher which one, but it was probably my maternal family that these liaisons got plugged into. Now, when they got plugged into them, they at some point got access to me, and essentially this big human behavior experimentation or this paranormal experiment or this social engineering experiment called gang stalking or this socio-political experiment called gang stalking was able to commence. And I was seen as a good guinea pig for gang stalking at the age of 10. Why would the U.S. federal government allow this kind of action to plague a 10-year-old, right? And mind you, from the ages of 10 to the age of 30, I saw gang stalking intermittently, randomly, sporadically. So randomly, in fact, that I became of the mindset, wow, this world is changing in some really odd ways, right? I had no idea that it was orchestrated cataclysms. I thought it was just random encounters with bizarre people. Now, ladies and gentlemen, at the age of 30, I started seeing a little more of this than I cared to. And I'll admit, sometimes it was amusing. Sometimes I'd look at street theater and synchronization and I'd go, you know what? I don't know what the heck this is. It could be the CIA. It could be the FBI. It could be the Department of Homeland Security. It could be the Sicilian Mafia for all I knew. But I knew that I was encountering bizarre circumstances. You know, was it a murder for hire plot gone wrong that someone in the Department of Defense or the Department of Justice picked up on? And they say, we need to watch this kid a little closer. There are some people he knew from when he was 17 years old that want to harm him. And then at some point during the mishmash, a gang stalking campaign came into being. I don't know. I just don't know, ladies and gentlemen. And keep something in mind, too. Okay? The gang stalking product is extrajudicial. Okay? There's nothing on the books that determines, via statutes, laws, and ordinances, who can be put in a gang stalking campaign and why. It's something that's done behind closed doors at the federal level. And it's so secretive that most U.S. politicians don't know about it. All right, and I'm not beating up on Cuba. And I'm not beating up on the Cuban people. I'm simply telling this matter to you with candor and with integrity. I would like to have a good relationship with my country. I would like to have a good relationship with the Cuban people. I would like to have a good relationship with all people. But you know what? When you're in a gang stalking campaign, that's just not possible. Okay? Many of my interpersonal relationships with family, friends, church members, educational peers have suffered badly because of this gang stalking campaign. Okay? It's as if the liaisons in charge of my gang stalking campaign have said, you know what? We're going to use this kid. We're going to allow stalkers access to him. We're just going to point stalkers in his general direction so they can get as close to him as possible so they can try and start some kind of a scuffle with him. Why? Because it amuses us and we think that there are people out there that want it to happen. All right, this guy's made a lot of enemies in his life, and some of those enemies have showed their ugly faces 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years later. So they can get back at him through us. Yes. If you have a deep desire to get back at somebody, you can get back at them through a liaison. Plug into their gang stalking campaign, and you can wreak havoc in that person's life endlessly through the liaisons. All you got to do is give them money and loyalty. And you can plug into somebody's gang stalking campaign. I'm letting you know something, ladies and gentlemen. This is beyond tyrannical. This is high treason in action. All right, my product is called gang stalking in action, but I could have just as easily called it high treason in action. My rights as a sovereign United States citizen, all of my rights, constitutional and otherwise, have not only been ignored, they have been trampled upon. And undercover operatives play a role in that. Okay? If I had known that I had undercover operatives before they started pestering me, not just observing like undercover operatives are supposed to, but pestering me, attacking me, trying to get me sick, with airborne bacteria, trying to harm my significant other as well, creating false narratives so they can use violence. Right? And I know you can hear the passion in my voice, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a naturally passionate person about anything that comes my way. Academics, philosophy, government, theology. Anything that I learn about, I become passionate about, and you can hear my passion. And, you know, when you're talking about undercover operatives, right? They draw a check from the taxpayer or from whatever company has sent them. Some of these undercover operatives come around, and it's like as soon as they see me, they immediately lose all sight of their training, of their oaths, and of their responsibilities and say, you know what? I'm going to use that kid to make a name for myself. I feel like my life as an undercover is mundane. I don't feel special. I'm going to try to create some kind of a dust-up with that kid so that I'll have something neat to report to my supervisor tomorrow. Me personally, sometimes I can avoid those types, sometimes I can't. And yes, I've gotten into many a verbal altercation with undercovers. I've cussed a few of them out. All right? And that's something else, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes it's difficult to be gentlemanly or keep your composure when you got undercover operatives coming at you left and right. All right? And not only undercover operatives, but stalkers, liaisons, and undercovers all together. Right? And what they'll say is, nah, we're professional. He's the one acting up. That's why we're so aggressive. He's the one, not us. He's the violent one, not us. He's the aggressive one, not us. He's the mean one, the surly one, not us. We're the utmost professionals when we encounter him. The reason we get so close to him is so we can get a good identification on him. All right? And if I, your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, were experiencing anything different than what I'm telling you, I would let you know. Ladies and gentlemen, the undercover operatives that I encounter act worse than primates. Okay? They act worse than zoo animals. They act worse than farm animals. I've seen domesticated dogs and cats with more class than a lot of the undercover operatives that I come across on a daily basis. And that goes for the liaisons and stalkers too. You all act worse. Your behavior is worse than that of a wild raccoon or possum. Okay? I'd like to have good relationships with all of the above, but I can't have good relationships with people that are being signaled to my location by other people to start a ruckus. You see, gang stalking is not about people being your friend. So if you're trying to act nice to a liaison, if you try to act nice to an undercover operative, if you try to be nice to a gang stalker, which trust me, I've tried that. You know what they'll say? They'll say, uh-oh, this guy's trying to suck up to us. He's tapping out. We beat him. We beat him in the name of civil order. We beat him in the name of civil justice. And we beat him in the name of the stalkers that want to see him harmed. We overcame this target. Look at him. He's on his knees begging us to stop. No, I'm trying to be a gentleman. If you all look at me in that capacity, to where your thuggery has tapped me out or made me submit, I have another thing to tell you. You're dead wrong. All right? I don't need to threaten anybody. I don't need to get into a physical altercation with anybody. I don't need to get into a verbal altercation with anybody either. Quite frankly, I don't need any of you in my life for any reason at all. If you're simply watching me, I don't mind that. If you've sworn an oath of service to your country or your government and you're assigned to watch me in an undercover capacity, I don't mind, because you're going to see the truth about gang stalking. Even if you try to lie about that truth or diminish that truth or undermine that truth and say, nah, gang stalking ain't nothing like what he says it is. It looks like a bunch of childish pranks being played on him. No, it's not. It's state-sanctioned murder. It's state-sanctioned assault. It's state-sanctioned burglary. It's state-sanctioned vandalism. It's state-sanctioned libel, slander, and character defamation. It's state-sanctioned mischief. It's a lot of things. All right? It's state-sanctioned bioterrorism. Because a lot of stalkers, liaisons, and undercover contaminate targeted persons' food to get them sick. All right? They contaminate a person's air to get them sick. Why? Because a lot of these Weasley undercovers and these Weasley liaisons and these Weasley stalkers, they feel safer around a sick target. Because when you're sick, you're not quite as strong as you are when you're well. So if they can find a way to keep me sick, then they can feel safer in their jobs because they're around a sick target and they can observe a sick target that can't do much to them if they try to initiate an act of hostility against them, an act of violence against them, an act of malfeasance against them. It's easier to perpetrate crimes against a sick person than it is a well person. It's easier to perpetrate crimes against humanity against a person who cannot fight you back. That's why stalkers, liaisons, and undercovers like to approach targets in groups, because they feel safer observing the target, pestering the target, spreading airborne germs to the target when there's a lot of stalkers around. All right, now this knucklehead that I said just passed me by, looking to disrupt the lecture, he's coming back. And I'm about to cross the street again to get away because he looks like he's trying to interrupt like he did the first time he walked past me, and he's back. So I'm about to cross the street and continue my lecture. So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, it isn't just physical violence that undercover operatives pester you with. They pester you with verbal nonsense as well. All right? Undercover operatives like to try and make the target uncertain. They like to try to make the target feel timid. They like to try to make the target feel unwell. They like to try to hurt the target. Right? Why? Again, gang stalking's auspices are extrajudicial. A targeted individual is not given a notice in the mail that says, Smith, starting in 2001 and ending in the year 2060, you are going to be subject to a human behavior experiment that we are going to run using a combination of Department of Defense and Department of Justice elements to suit our own purposes and our own investigations into your life and the lives of people that you've known over the course of it. It's nothing like that. One day you wake up and you're in a targeted campaign against your life. I don't know why these persons, these stalkers, I don't know what it is about me or my life that made these people think that I was going to take this lying down. Okay? I'm not saying that I can or can't get rid of them with my words. I'm not saying that I can or can't get rid of them with FBI reports. I'm not saying I can and can't get rid of them with Department of Justice reports. I'm not saying I can or can't get rid of them with police reports. What I can say to you is this. All of the undercover operatives, liaisons, and stalkers that I have come in contact with, particularly over the past 10 years, operate with impunity. All right? And they are not here to do justice. They are here to harm me personally so that my words don't look true. All right, they would like to, I don't know. I mean, it really is disgusting. It really is disgusting what they do. And it's not a situation where they come at you and say, hey, I'm from this department or that department or this auxiliary or that auxiliary. I'm here investigating this or that. Can you give me any information or insights to help my investigation? That's not what they do. And quite frankly, I think a lot of my undercovers, liaisons, and stalkers know about my company, EIS Media Group, and Bible Discourses LLC, and they know about my various social media pages and my various websites, and they know what my political views are, and they know I'm a political dissident that would like to get the hell out of America as soon as possible. All right? I think they know that. And they're not here looking to change my mind either. They're of the mindset, hey, we're employees of the state. We work in an undercover capacity. And you know what? We're looking to have a little fun today and make a name for ourselves. We'll use that guy there that all those stalkers are pointing at. That guy, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, we'll use him as fodder. He'll be our cannon fodder for today. And we're going to make sure to bring our guns too, because you know what? If he gives us any crap, we'll use them and we'll create a false report that he was threatening our life or something. All right, that's how operatives think. And ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the totality of the situation, it all comes down to a few things. Some Americans, some people, just like feeling superior to others. And how do they do that? Well, there are a number of ways of feeling superior to another person, One thing you can do is assert your superiority with violence. Another thing you can do is assert your superiority with technology. Another thing you can do is assert your superiority with governmental processes. All right? Some people file false police reports against other people. Why? Because it allows a person to feel like they have control over another person's life and their reputation. Gang stalkers like to try and exert control over other people's life and their reputation. It's not difficult to exert control over another person's life and reputation. Now, here's the discipline to the matter. If somebody tries to exert control over your life and your reputation, and their means by doing that are criminal or unjust, you can file complaints against that person if it's done in the workplace. You can file complaints against that person if it's done in a church setting. You can file complaints against that person if it's done in any corporate or institutional setting. You can file police reports against that person if it's done, to you as a citizen. You can actually file civil injunctions against the person or sue that person in a court of law if what they're doing to you violates your civil rights. Okay? Now, here's how you avoid all that. Right? If you're a gang stalker and you want to exert control over a person's life and image and reputation, and you want to avoid complaints, you want to avoid police reports, you want to avoid lawsuits, well, there's gang stalking. You can exert control over a person's life, image, and reputation using gang stalking campaigns. Why? Because in addition to the pestering, annoyance, and biohazardous components of gang stalking, there's a character defamation, slander, and libel component of gang stalking that you can use easily. All you got to do is wait for your fellow stalkers, your fellow undercover operatives, or your fellow liaisons to point the target out to you using a verbal command or a physical gesture or a vehicular maneuver. They'll point you right out. And after they point you out, then they can descend upon you like a pack of wild hyenas and nothing can happen to them because it's hard to prove. Gang stalking is supposed to be an unprovable, undocumentable, and undetectable attack mechanism that is supposed to benefit the stalker and disadvantage the target. Why? So certain segments of the American population can feel more powerful, more worthwhile, more valued, and generally superior to other segments of the population. And when this program is put into motion, all a targeted person can do, typically, the ones that don't know what's happening to them, which was me for a good 10 years, from about the age of 20 to the age of 30, I didn't know what was going on. So I just lived through it. But at the age of 30, when I figured out that what I was experiencing had a name, a face, and a price tag, well, I picked up a tablet and started recording, started a few websites, and the rest is history. All right? And everything I post online is free. I don't charge money for what I do. What I do is a public service. I only want the tools and resources that I need to make my trajectory through this world better, cleaner, more pleasurable, more prosperous. So I investigate gang stalking and I talk about gang stalking. Anyone else who's experiencing this, it doesn't have to be in droves like I do. Even if you experience it once a week, it diminishes the quality of your life and it allows people who breathe the same air you breathe to use state resources to make your life worse and their life better. Anyone who would take part in such a project is a buffoon. And I'm proving to you on a daily basis why you're a buffoon. It's because you got exposed. And you got exposed royally. You got exposed on a level never before seen in the history of this country. And one day you're going to have to sit back in a rocking chair and tell your grandkids about the time Emmanuel Isaiah Smith exposed you on Facebook for acting like a jerk. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to tell you something about me, all right? I am not a fearful person. There are people here in Miami-Dade County and indeed throughout the country. It's a segment, it's a personality type that I'm trying to figure out. Okay, what is this personality type? Well, it's the kind of person that tries to make acting like a coward cool. Hey, we can cause mischief, and then we can run and jump over a fence and never be seen or heard from again. Or we can cause catastrophes and cataclysms, and then hop on a motorbike and ride off into the sunset. Or we can cause severe anguish or physical trauma to a person, and then jump in a Dodge Neon and drive down the street at 70 miles an hour and get away from them. We can cause problems for people in the workplace, and then we can report them to the Human Resources Department if they say anything back to us. We can spread libel and slander about a person at church, and then we can run and tell the pastor if that person says anything to us. We can break into somebody's home and pester his family while he's gone, and then we can go to the local police department and write a false police report about how his family was harassing us. We can walk up to a person on the street and mug them, and then call a local detective and say that that person mugged us. We can go to a grocery store and knock over somebody who's holding a baby stroller and then run outside and call the police and tell the police that somebody with a baby stroller threatened our life. We can hack somebody's computer and steal all their personal information and then go write a report to the FBI about how that person hacked our computer and stole all our personal information. We can file a false complaint against somebody at work and then go tell the supervisor how that person was being mean and threatening to us, and we felt fear for our lives. We could threaten somebody's family and then go call the police and say that that person threatened our family and that we're scared for our lives. We can call a local dope smuggler and tell him to act like he's cool with a person, and then we can go call the police and tell them, hey, there's a local dope smuggler in our neighborhood. We think you need to investigate it. We can cause problems for our enemy's child at school and then go home that same day and call the police and say our enemy's child threatened our lives and that we're scared for our families. All of these things will help us get the upper hand on people we don't like or trust. And when you throw gang stalking into the mix, ladies and gentlemen, what you have is a country of weasels that have access to state resources that are designed to do absolutely nothing but cause cataclysms in the lives of other people, so you can feel like you are better than that person, smarter than that person, more resourceful than that person, and a more valued citizen than that person. Some people's lives are made more fulfilled and more purposeful when they're able to cause catastrophes in the lives of other people. It's just one of those things. As I often say, ladies and gentlemen, human depravity is a bottomless pit. There is no depth that the human mind is not capable of going to deprive another person of their rights and liberties. You know, when you talk about these undercover operatives, when you talk about these liaisons, when you talk about these stalkers, right? You're talking about a group of people who are so disgusted with how their life has turned out that they feel that they need to trouble other people to make their lives more purposeful. And when you throw in intimidation and violence into the mix, and you get these useful idiot types, there is no limit to the havoc and the damage that they can cause. Even over and above your civil rights and your constitutional rights, they can apparently penetrate those rights with the expectation of making their lives more interesting. You know, there are times where I see undercovers and I think to myself, you know, my relationship with my undercovers and my relationship with my country would be so much better if these undercover operatives, these stalkers and the liaisons would just get the hell away. If you need to observe me from a distance. You do not need to get that close to me to do your damn job. You're trying to get some sort of a scuffle started so you can have something neat to tell your supervisor tomorrow. That's it. That's all you're doing. All right? Now, I got a stalker across the street. He's got on a green shirt and a black hat. This guy has stood across the street and watched me talk for the last 20 minutes. He's standing at a bus stop. A bus just came and he waved it away. It's the only it's a trolley. It's the only trolley that comes this way. The trolley came and stopped and he waved it away so he could stand there and continue to listen to me. Right? This is some of what I'm talking about. Behavior like that, it's strange, it's unusual, it's annoying, it's pestering, and it's creepy. All right? In Miami-Dade County, basically you have bus stops and you have trolley stops. If you're at a bus stop, there could be any number of buses that stop there. For example, there are buses that there are bus stops that have multiple buses that stop there. So let's say there's a bus stop where you can catch the 8 route, the 11 route, or the 87 route. If you're waiting on the 87 and the 8 route or the 11 route approach, you can wave them on. Because you're not waiting on those buses, you're waiting on the 87. And then when the 87 comes, you get on the bus and you leave. But at a trolley stop, there's only one thing that stops there, and that's the trolley. So if you're standing at a trolley stop and a trolley rolls up, that's the only form of transportation you're going to get at that particular stop. So this guy watching me across the street, he's standing next to my items. He's standing next to my book bag and my lemonade. A trolley just came, and that's the only trolley that's going to stop there. The trolley stopped to pick him up, and he waved it off so he could stand there and hear me talk. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. All right? This guy obviously has some sort of an assignment he's filling. All right? This guy obviously has some job he's doing. Right? His job is to observe me, and he's not ready to leave. You understand? That's peculiar. Okay? That's the kind of stuff I take into considerations when I gauge whether or not the person that's standing across the street from me or the person that's riding up next to me on a motorbike is a gang stalker. Okay? They might be terrorists. Like I said, Cuba, which is only about 96 miles away from here, has been deemed by the U.S. federal establishment as a state sponsor of terrorism. All right, Mike Waltz, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, made that clear last month. And this isn't the first time Cuba has found itself on state sponsor of terrorism lists. Cuba has found itself on state sponsors of terrorism lists since 1982. So it's not new to Cuba. Me personally, my concern is why isn't the Department of Justice and the intelligence community taking a break from all the gang stalking and investigating Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I have terrorist undercovers watching me. As far as I'm concerned, I could have undercover operatives watching me right now that sympathize with terrorists. All right? The apple doesn't fall that far from the tree is what I'm saying. I'm not accusing all Cuban people of sympathizing with the Cuban state's notions of terrorism, but I'm saying this, persons who see themselves as patriotic Cubans might be okay with their government being a state sponsor of terrorism. All right? I see knuckleheads every day. Some of them are undercover operatives that I suspect of having terrorist ties. How are you going to prove that, Smith? It's difficult to prove it. That's why they do it. All right? Are there terror cells operating in Miami-Dade County? Yeah, it's obvious. Cuba's only 95 3/4 miles away from here. So if Cuba's a state sponsor of terrorism, then obviously there's got to be terror cells operating in the United States. All right? Does the Department of Defense and the intelligence apparatus care to investigate that? Hell no. The Department of Defense and the intelligence apparatus ain't about to risk their life and safety to investigate no terrorism. They're not about to risk not going home to their wife and kids to investigate some terrorism. They're not about to put their lives on hold with all this gang stalking going on. They want to participate in gang stalking. They don't want to investigate no terrorism. These undercover operatives running around here don't want to investigate no terrorism. We'll leave all that dangerous stuff to Emmanuel Isaiah Smith. He's the one that needs to investigate the terrorism. See, here in the United States of America, we do things on a need-to-know basis. We like gang stalking because it's safe. We can find a pack of gang stalkers and descend upon somebody just for fun. Then we can go back to our Jeep Wranglers and write a phony report about the target, how he was hostile, and go back to our supervisor the next morning and tell him, hey, you'll never guess what I found out yesterday. We don't want to investigate no terrorism. This is Cuba we're talking about. We ain't about to investigate no state-sanctioned terrorism from no Cuba. That's the country of our ancestors. We ain't about to investigate nothing. We want to do gang stalking activity. That is where our mind is at. That is where our heart is at. That is where we are personally and professionally invested, is in gang stalking activity. We don't want to investigate nothing beyond that. We know the United States ambassador to the United Nations just said that Cuba's a terrorist state, but we don't care. Hell, let them operate in South Florida. We don't care. Investigations of terrorism ain't no fun. Perpetrating acts of gang stalking is way more fun. Hell, we don't want to investigate no terrorism. You know what we'd rather do? as a Department of Defense and as a national security auxiliary and as an intelligence auxiliary, you know what we'd rather do? We'd rather allow people that knew Emmanuel I. Smith from 5, 10, or 25 years ago to get back at him for stuff. We'd rather do that. We don't want to investigate no state-sponsored terrorism. We don't want to investigate terror cells here in the United States, even if it is in South Florida. All right, we'd rather let people that knew this Smith guy from 5, 10, 15, or 25 years ago to get back at him for stuff. That's what we want to do. That's more fun. Right? We don't want to investigate nothing that's coming out of Cuba or any other state that's allegedly a terrorist state. That's too dangerous. That's too mind-boggling. We got families to go home to. We'd much rather allow people that knew this Smith guy from 25 years ago to show their ugly faces here in Miami-Dade, Florida, and use pestering tactics against him. We can make that happen real easy. But please, don't ask us to investigate Cuba. We don't want to investigate Cuba. Don't make us do that. Cuba ain't gonna hurt nobody. I know they're designated as a state sponsor of terrorism, but they're not gonna hurt nobody. We don't want to investigate that. Even if the Cuban government is financing terror cells here in Miami, we don't want to investigate that. We'd rather let people that knew this Smith guy from 20 years ago come back to him in the form of gang stalkers and pester him and get back at him for something. That's where our expertise is. Right? I mean, I got throngs of stalkers right now, right this very second, with all kinds of bugging activity and surveillance equipment watching me and listening. Right? They're using every trick in the book to justify this thuggery that they use. I got people watching me from long distances with binoculars and bugging equipment, down talking me to other stalkers. Why? So they can feel superior to themselves or me. And that's the discipline of the thing. Prove your superiority by violating the rights of another person without them being able to do anything back to you. That's how you prove your superiority. All right? I just had a guy from the city of Doral pull up in a garbage truck, and he's getting ready to start changing the garbage in this on this bench that I got my bag and my lemonade sitting on. And when he saw me, he took some sort of a device that's used to pick up garbage off of the ground and kind of swung it my way, almost as if to say, I wish I could smack you with this garbage device. Right? Why? Because it makes him feel better about himself. You see, that's what gang stalking is all about. It's about using protocols that are undefined, unconstitutional, and oftentimes criminal to perpetrate harms or ills against people so you can feel better about yourself. You understand? And undercover operatives are no different. Undercover operatives get around you, and using a signaling mechanism, particularly one that's provided to them by the state, They can perpetrate all kinds of thuggery against a targeted person. All they got to do is wait for the right signal. This is our target. 1, 2, 3, go. And these undercover operatives forget everything that they were ever taught, and whatever their educational curriculum was in law enforcement. I guess there are just some people that just have a need to stand out. They can't do anything in life unless they're standing out. Standing out above the crowd, standing out above the rest is what makes their life worthwhile. And if they can't stand out, they just can't take life. You see? And how does a gang stalker learn to stand out? Well, if they can get plugged into a gang stalking campaign and learn signals, then they can go anywhere in the country, and if they see a signal that they understand, and a signal that's aimed at them, and a signal that involves a target, they can walk up to any target anywhere in the country and pester, annoy, harass, use biohazardous protocols, disruption protocols, and other protocols to harm the quality of that person's life. And that's what makes them feel better about theirs. Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen.